This is CBC Vancouver News.
Donald J. Trump has been convicted of 34 counts of falsifying business records.
This was a rigged, disgraceful trial.
A first in U.S. history. A former president is now a convicted felon. A jury finding Donald Trump guilty on all counts in his hush money trial. Also, follow through on your promise. That message to the province from hundreds of BC nurses, all demanding sufficient staffing and a safer workplace. Plus,
it's actually the BC Conservatives who are edging the BC NDP just by a little bit at the moment.
5 months out from the next BC election, and the latest polling in provincial politics shows why Surrey might be more key than ever this time around. Hello, I'm Tanya Fletcher. Thanks for joining us. It is a day that has been inked in the U.S. history books. A former president, now convicted felon. A jury found Donald Trump guilty on all 34 charges in his hush money trial. That verdict came after more than 5 weeks of evidence and testimony, but less than 2 days of jury deliberation. The CBC's Chris Reyes has more on our top story from New York.
The moment of truth came suddenly. Just as everyone thought they were about to be sent home, the judge instead called all parties back into the courtroom and informed them that at 4:20 p.m. Eastern Time, the jury had reached a verdict. Soon after, all 12 jurors were called in, and one by one they went through the charges of 34 counts of falsifying business records, all for the purpose of covering up other crimes, a Class E felony that carries a maximum prison sentence of 4 years. Over and over again, the foreperson declared guilty on all counts, taking less than 5 minutes to deliver all of the verdicts. Read from this form, check marks all down one row. From Trump, no reaction.
Trump is guilty.
Outside the courtroom, word traveled quickly, eliciting a scattered response, some cheering on the news.
I'm ecstatic that he's finally being held accountable for something.
The jury left the courtroom soon after they made history and walked past their former American president without looking at him. Trump then made his now familiar march down the hall outside the courtroom, vowing this isn't over.
We'll keep fighting, we'll fight till the end, and we'll win, because our country's gone to hell.
Trump has argued this process was rigged since the trial began 5 weeks ago. One of his biggest targets has been Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg, who indicted Trump more than a year ago. Bragg praised the work of his team and the jury.
I did my job. We did our job. Many voices out there. The only voice that matters is the voice of the jury, and the jury has spoken.
That was the CBC's Chris Reyes in New York. To BC politics now, where the two center-right parties are in a battle for voters ahead of this fall's election. The latest Angus Reid survey finds the surging BC Conservatives with nearly double the support of the faltering BC United, and the NDP still with a comfortable lead over both. As the CBC's Mira Baines reports, one pollster suggests strategists are now turning their attention to Surrey.
The battle for the provincial vote has been boiling over, with the leaders of BC United and the BC Conservatives clashing after a failed merger. Angus Reid Institute's latest poll confirms a pattern emerging in terms of voter support, with the BC NDP in the lead. The BC NDP is holding a comfortable lead with 41% support among those polled, while the BC Conservatives follow with 30%. Kevin Falcon's rebranded BC United have 16% support, while the BC Greens have 11%. The pollster points out the numbers also show what's going on under the surface.
What's really key here is that half of the BC United voting base says that it might abandon BC United for the BC Conservatives if it meant stopping the NDP, but also crucially, half of BC Conservative voters say that they might abandon the BC Conservatives for BC United.
Also emerging out of the data is the importance of crucial wins in voter-rich and vast Surrey. 10 ridings are up for grabs.
And if you look at what's happening, it's actually the BC Conservatives who are edging the BC NDP just by a little bit at the moment.
Today, a website emerged attacking both Kevin Falcon of BC United and John Rustad with the BC Conservatives. Rustad's party is under the spotlight this week after a candidate in Courtney Comox dropped out after his social media views opposing pride parades became public.
He recognized it could be a distraction for our campaign, offered his resignation, and we accepted it.
Meanwhile, Falcon responded to another website calling for his resignation.
In 2013, there was a bunch of people that put together some Resign Christie website until she won a majority in the government, and they all disappeared, and so did the website. So, I mean, this is the kind of, political gamesmanship that sometimes goes on.
The Angus Reid poll shows people used favorable words to describe NDP leader David Eby, but also said he was boring, with the words used to describe both Falcon and Rustad largely unfavorable. But Curl said a few bad bounces for the BC NDP during the next 5 months could lead to a very different picture on Election Day in October. Mira Baines, CBC News, Vancouver.
Hundreds of nurses from across the province swept across the downtown core in Vancouver today to call out the BC government. They're demanding the province follow through on its promise of sufficient staff to patient ratios and for safer working conditions.
Safe staffing saved lives, and having enough nurses and taking care of those nurses will have a positive impact on all the residents of BC.
In April, the BC Nurses Union and the province agreed to a 3-year deal that includes record-setting compensation for BC nurses and mandatory ratios. The union says those staffing shortages have reached such dire levels that the temporary ER closures throughout the province are becoming normal. They add working conditions must improve if they want to keep staff, let alone attract new workers. Well, politicians, doctors, and researchers all gathered in Richmond today in a desperate search for solutions to BC's toxic drug crisis. Their focus was on recovery, but it came with controversy. As Michelle Gassoub explains, some advocates claim they were barred from attending.
At this hotel in Richmond, doctors, advocates, and policymakers gathered, discussing solutions to the toxic drug crisis.
So we will bring an end to this idea of safe supply and decriminalization. Not because we want to turn it into a legal issue, because it's not. We don't want people arrested for simple possession or use.
Among the speakers, provincial party leaders Kevin Falcon and John Rustad, both of whom oppose decriminalization.
You have to understand there's going to be diversion that takes place. Because guess what? Language matters when it comes to drugs. When you say safe supply, to us that might mean one thing. To a 14-year-old, that means an entirely different thing.
The event was put on by Prosper, a nonprofit group co-founded by former Obama advisor Kevin Sabet.
We are not here to support any political party. We're nonpartisan, and we really don't appreciate anybody using this issue to gain political points. And so I think that has happened, and everybody's probably guilty of that.
The symposium was moved from downtown Vancouver to Richmond with just a few hours' notice. Organizers heard of a planned protest by activists. Fearing the event would be disrupted, they deregistered some of those who planned to attend and denied them entry to the hotel. Activists with groups like Vandu countered with a protest at the original venue.
We want to go there because we want to know, what do they propose? What are they planning? Can we work together? We're all trying to do the same thing, which is to support people who use drugs.
We understand emotions go high. Let's let things kind of simmer down a bit, and we've invited them to a very open, constructive, and peaceful dialogue when they're ready.
In Parliament, Dr. Bonnie Henry addressed just how polarized the issue has become.
That harm reduction and recovery and treatment are not in competition. It is not either or. They are both essential.
A view echoed by those with lived experience who say every resource is needed to stop the deaths.
Why can't we just support both? And, you want to support recovery and move forward with recovery, you don't have to say anything bad about harm reduction. And if harm reduction, you move forward, you don't have to say anything bad about recovery, because the truth is it's not helping the people who are struggling.
From Ottawa to the street to hotel conference rooms, a look at just how polarizing the policies around BC's drug crisis have become. Michelle Gassoub, CBC News, Richmond.
3 BC municipalities hardest hit by brutal flooding in 2021 have been told they will not be getting federal funding to help rebuild. The mayor of Merritt says they applied for help to rebuild dikes.
The atmospheric river, one of 13 happened. The one that caused us the most issues happened on November 16th. 2021, and our dikes look exactly the same as they did that morning. There has not been one rock turned on those dikes.
He's not sure why their application was rejected, but says that money is badly needed. Abbotsford and Princeton also say their applications from HELP were rejected as well.
It's a pretty big blow. We have no real funds now left to do any major dike works, any of the flood control works.
The three mayors have now scheduled a news conference for Monday. CBC News asked the federal government why it rejected those applications. We have not yet received a response. Well, British Columbia has today launched a new toll-free hotline for people who experience racism. It was created for those who have been the target of discrimination based on the color of their skin, culture, ethnicity, or place of origin. Callers will get support and guidance such as counseling and help with reporting incidents to police. Lower Mainland truckers say they are glad some cities are planning to build more parking spaces for big rigs. But the demand far exceeds what's being offered, at least for now. As our Saurabh Sandhu reports, many want the provincial government to now get involved.
Dilraj Gill and his uncle Raman are taking stock of all the parking tickets their company trucks have been given in the last few months.
The city's been handing out a lot of tickets, but there's no there's not a good solution they really put up to that.
Gill says the shortage of legal parking spaces for commercial trucks is a perpetual and pricey problem.
Even if we do get a couple of spots, they're probably the prices are pretty high. It's around $700 to $800.
And trucking industry advocates say it's a widespread issue.
It's the whole Lower Mainland. So we have south of the Fraser, where all the trucking industry has been pushed out.
Other drivers say it's exhausting to try to find a spot.
I've been changed like 4 or 5 parking last 5-6 years, so there is no good parking available in Abbotsford and Langley, nowhere.
On Monday, the city of Surrey moved ahead with its plan to build 150 truck parking spots at 4 designated sites.
That 150 spots will absolutely be expanding. There will be more. But just this last council meeting on Monday, we passed 2 TUPs to add additional truck parking. So the private sector is getting involved and engaged.
Still, drivers say it's a drop in the bucket.
In Surrey alone, we need like over 2,000 parking spots. And the other thing, which we have to keep in mind is the proposals that have been put forward. They're like temporary use permits, TUPs as they call them. They're issued for 3-year term, and they can only be renewed once. So it's only for 6 years.
Kumar is calling on Victoria to get involved.
In our meeting with all the other municipalities, everybody points the fingers at the provincial government, and they are missing from the table.
The BC government notes in March it opened a new truck parking facility in North Surrey with more than 100 parking spots, and it expects to add 50 more as part of the Fraser Valley Highway 1 improvement project. More spaces for an issue that won't be solved overnight.
A temporary solution to a permanent need doesn't cut it.
Saurabh Sandhu, CBC News, Langley.
If you're planning to hit a Vancouver beach this summer with some beverages, you'll now officially be allowed to take an alcoholic drink with you, but only at some locations. Starting Saturday until the end of September, adults can legally bring and drink alcohol at some beaches from 11 a.m. to 9 p.m. This includes Jericho, Kitsilano, Locarno, Spanish Banks, New Brighton Beach, Second Beach, and Trout Lake. However, you won't be able to drink at English Bay, Sunset Beach, Third Beach, Crab Park, or beaches along the Fraser River. Police say they will be doing more seaside patrols this summer.
We're here to ensure that everyone visiting the city, those residents of the city that come to our parks and beaches, do so in a very safe and positive and happy manner.
If you do plan to have booze with you at the beach, you'll have to leave the glass bottles at home. They're banned to try to avoid broken glass. Well, still ahead, looks like the band is getting back together. We trace the Summer of '69 tour back to Vanderhoof, of all places. That's coming up next. Welcome back. A suspected AI-generated image of the southern Gaza city of Rafah is sweeping across social media. It shows rows and rows of tents in a large camp with the words "All eyes on Rafah." It's been shared more than 47 million times by celebrities and people all over the world. But as the CBC's Georgie Smythe is finding out, experts say it might not be quite as effective as people think.
These are real images of refugee camps in Gaza, showing the chaos of tents and the reality of displaced people who live there. But going viral online is this image, set against a backdrop of endless lined tents and a dramatic snow-capped mountain range, with the message, "All eyes on Rafah." It's been shared more than 47 million times, but many suspect it was created through AI.
It's most likely an imaginary scene.
It appeared on an Instagram account after an Israeli airstrike at a camp earlier this week and presents a more sanitized view of what's happening in Gaza's southernmost city, which may have allowed for the image to circulate more readily on social media than actual images of the war.
It's unclear if it was AI generated or not. We think it is. It looks like it would have been text-to-image generation, but it could be a very good illustrator using regular computer graphics and special effects.
The image also provoked the creation of this AI-generated image from an Israeli supporter online. Some are calling the All Eyes on Rafah image the latest iteration of slacktivism or lazy activism, when people support a cause online without making much commitment to it, like people posting black squares online for the Black Lives Matter campaign in 2020. Actions that can be genuine but often lack real-life impact, say researchers.
Sometimes what happens is that there's this kind of peak of support and awareness, and then it fades from public consciousness.
Palestinians who want more awareness about the war say the AI-made image glosses over the realities of the conflict.
There's this feeling like, Palestinians are going viral, but they're also somehow invisible at the same time.
The question is, what happens now? The image and its message may have been shared millions of times, but its impact in the real world is harder to measure. Georgie Smythe, CBC News, Vancouver.
So just to remind you, Jimmy quit, Jody got married, and the best days of the summer of '69 in Vanderhoof faded away. But the Bryan Adams hit lived on, and it turns out so did the bands. We were in the town for a reunion of sorts. Check it out.
I was in Vanderhoof, and it was magical. It's when I discovered music. It's when I got my first drum kit, got my first guitar, met some guys and made a band. Then I met Bryan Adams. He and I started writing, 1978, and 5 years of really nothing to show for it. We just worked really hard, and really there was no hits until about 5 years in. And it always started the same, two guys in a room staring at an empty piece of paper. Like, what are we going to write about? And on that particular day, we decided we would write about our first bands, our first guitars, our first girlfriends, just kind of our youth. And, got my first real 6-string, okay, yeah, bought it at the 5 and dime. But it wasn't called Summer of '69, it was called Best Days of My Life. And tucked away in the first verse was this little phrase, Summer of '69. And suddenly the song just came alive.
We're going to put Jim back on the drums, and we're doing Summer of '69 with the original words that Jim wrote with the Vanderhoof band members.
Yeah, so when Bryan and I were sitting in the room and we got to that line, I said, my guys in the band, Chuck quit and Gordy got married. And Bryan went, no. And guys in his band, Jimmy, his previous drummer, and Jody, his sound man. So Bryan said, what about Jimmy quit and Jody got married? I said, yeah, I agree, that sounds better. My memories as Bryan and I were sitting there putting the lyric together, I was channeling my days in Vanderhoof. When I hear the song, I just think about Vanderhoof.
You're looking at the sunset this evening earlier from Long Beach Lodge into Fino. And that sun will stick around for the most part tomorrow, but the rain is set to resume just in time for the weekend, at least for some parts. We'll have your 5-day forecast coming up next.
The weather update is brought to you by Direct Buy Furnace. To cool and clean the air in your home, call Direct Buy Furnace. Installing Trane, the most reliable heating and cooling brand.
And time for a look at the forecast. We've got our Darius Madavi here. And Darius, I know you warned us about a possible stray shower this morning. I think I was the only one who got caught in it. The one shower, I'm sure.
I thought it didn't happen, to be honest.
No, it did.
Yeah. Thank you. I don't need radar when I have you attracting all the rain to tell me. Yes, a bit of a stray shower. Tomorrow, totally dry, though, pretty much across BC, unless you find yourself on the north or central coast, maybe the North Island as well, west coast of the island there, as that next system rolls in. But for now, very dry tomorrow, but don't expect it to last too long. Gray again as we get into the weekend. Lots of rain on the way, weekend and into early next week, which means we may even see the fire danger in a few places, like below here, drop a little bit. Unclear whether that system is going to make it all the way up to the northeast. They will probably get some rain early next week, but the first couple, as we get into the weekend, next couple days, it's still pretty dry up there. So expect lots of the fire danger staying low down here. Unclear whether they're going to change up there. If you take a look here, you can see that precipitation. See, as we get into Monday, where we get a little bit more uncertain, so we're switching models, you can see some of that making its way up there, but other than that, pretty dry. Here on the coast, though, swamped with rain. Sunday is looking quite wet and windy, up to maybe 30 millimeters of rain, even at low elevations, possible on Sunday, so be ready for that. It is trending a little bit less wet than it was last night and this morning, but it still could be a very wet day on Sunday, so be prepared for that possibility at least, although Saturday trending a little bit drier, especially in the afternoon. Also some strong winds coming along with that system, particularly here on the coast. It will spike at times in other places in the interior, including up in the northeast, but with those other ingredients for that really active fire weather, it shouldn't be too much of a concern for now. Beyond that, pretty calm in the southern parts of the province, maybe some strong winds in some of the valleys, but not too much to worry about there. Temperatures, again, pretty much a couple degrees below seasonal right over the next few days. Not too much of a weather story there, to be honest. But if we take a look at our conditions across the province tomorrow, a lot less storms just up in Fort Nelson. It's a possibility. Other than that, very dry, very sunny. And it's not the same story here for the next few days. One day of sunshine and then lots of rain on the way.
We'll take advantage of tomorrow, that's for sure. Thanks, Darius.
Thank you.
And that is your late news for this Thursday, May 30th. For news anytime, anywhere, download the free CBC News app. You can always find us online at cbc.ca/BC. Your next local newscast is on the early edition on CBC Radio 1 starting tomorrow at 5 a.m. Thanks for watching. Have a good night.